Miss Kim, welcome to Carolinian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for speaking with me today. And today we really want to talk about the culture of cover up in Wake County, in Raleigh, in North Carolina, and all over the country.
Wow.
Um, and so I'd like to really start kind of with some background um, to get to a point where you call something a culture. There has to be some pattern, some recognition of that pattern. Usually, at least in this case, a problem, underlying problem with that pattern. Can you take us through how we got to this point?
Wow. That's a huge undertaking, but I will definitely try, Jordan. Um, as a historian, especially from Raleigh, one of your main cities in the state of North Carolina, we have to go back and talk about how our cities were formed, how our states were formed, and who were they formed for? When they chartered these states, they were not made for black liberation. They opened up with enslavement. And so much of what you see today in our major cities are the residue and from blacks being pushed in isolated areas. As you well know, right here in the city of Raleigh, blacks were pushed into smaller settings for slavery, and most of what we see around us is former plantations. All the streets are named after former slave owners. And so when you just ignore that year after year and generation after generation, we just sort of formulate what we have today. And it is a transition from slave patrol to cops. Um, so we have a break of slave patrol, and then we go into the Confederacy where they change and put on uniforms, and then they become heroes. They come off take off the uniform, and then they put on another uniform. And instead of cotton, they start chasing oxycontin. So you see the transition from one state to the other. And I often say that we're no longer private property owned by private slave owners. Now we are property of the state. And so that is why 60% of our institutions of prisons are now filled with black men. And so nothing much has changed. And the only thing that has changed is the fugitive slave law, which means at least when we were slaves, you could beat us an inch near death. And they would prefer that if they had to chase you, that you were brought back to the plantation alive. Today, that is not the case. They just gun you down and you barely make it to the curb.
Mm.
And so that is where we are. Our value is so low that you don't have to keep us alive.
We've seen, especially with law enforcement in the city and in the county, many problems
Sure.
come to light. There had always been problems, as you've been explaining, but at least historically, many of the times those things stayed in the dark.
So yes, Daryl Wims certainly is an I won't say a good example because nothing is good about what is happening when it comes to the corruption in law enforcement, especially in the city of Raleigh, the place where they say that we are the number third place in the nation to live, safest place in the nation. And so I often have to ask, who is safe and safe from who? Because of course, some people are protected and served, and then some are occupied and managed. And so in our communities, we are more managed and occupied than protected and served. Daryl Wims is a result of that. Why? Because drugs is everywhere. And on that particular night, the officers just drove up into the parking lot where there was um, businesses and activities. And of course, yes, they assumed drugs was there. However, they came up with um, their lights off. They did not introduce themselves as officers. And pretty much we call those predatory stops. Why? Because it's a sneak attack. And you will never see that, even though we know there are drugs that run rapid throughout the city of Raleigh and the county. you very seldom see predatory stops. They just don't happen. Um, and so this has also taken place when you talk about Omar Abdullah, which was a detective on the Vice Squad, black male, leading quite a few white males in the police department. And he basically pinned heroin charges and arrested them falsely on those charges without even having substantiated the evidence.
Mm.
Came back none conclusive. The DA, which is another issue, did not want to press charges on anyone, though they sat in jail for months. Um, they were all released once we found this out. Um, and again, another $2 million lawsuit between at least 15 black men. So we're looking at not just corruption, but targeted corruption. Um, we probably won't hear that happening to any white people who are on methamphetamines or any of the other classifications of drugs because they are not targeted in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and many people don't know that immediately after that lawsuit was settled, literally, Lords of London, I don't know if you are familiar with that, but Lords of London was the insurer for slaves, the slave trade. The City of Raleigh had been doing business with them for quite some time. And they discontinued their contract with us after that settlement. So again, our ties to slavery in the City of Raleigh is not very old at all. That relationship and that culture has not been broken. What we're finding disappointing is that you're willing to pay out settlements, but you're willing to keep bad cops. And so what does that say to the citizens, the black community, that we'll take the insurance money and pay you, but we'll keep our corrupt cops? And you can find that trend. DC Twitty was in that bunch of the Vice Squad. DC Twitty is the officer who killed Akio Dinkins on February the 29th, 2016, and no body cameras were available because we had begged the city and they just failed to provide. They provided after he died. So we can go on and on about the corruption. It's certainly a culture. And I think what's disturbing is that when they start recruiting African Americans to be a part of that culture after the civil rights fight, it makes us wonder who we are. Who do we become when we get power? And you're no longer black, but you're blue. So what is DEI for us when African Americans go into law enforcement? And we have to ask that of George Floyd's case, because even though they prosecuted Derek Chauvin, he had 17 prior grievances before he killed George Floyd. But on his watch, there was a black chief of police. And it just looks as if, like Raleigh, we have black chiefs, but we also have chiefs that are complicit or complacent or they become Klansmen through qualified immunity as well, and they just turn a blind eye.
Yeah, you talk, and you've mentioned a couple times how the culture has kind of been inculcated throughout the whole community.
Yes.
Whether it be not just the partnerships the city has, but the road names, the buildings, and of course the police that are patrolling the areas.
Yes.
And like Derek Chauvin, who had a black police chief, Raleigh has had a black police chief for, I believe, nearly a decade now.
Yes.
Continuously.
Yes.
And we just got another one. What do you think are some things that he should be working on to make some progress to kind of cut out and confront this culture of cover-ups throughout the entire history of the city of Raleigh?
Well, one of the things I think is that there should be room for African Americans in any job description to be honest about what they're actually taking part of when they become a career or a servant in any area. And I think what has happened is they don't take ownership of being black once they become an employee, even though that career choice may select them to be a face, but that's it. And they have to stop, to say, hey, yes, I'm black, but that also comes with the following. And I don't think they stop the culture because they are scared of retaliation, lack of protection from others on site, and I believe they don't want to look as if it's us against them. They want to have a unified front. However, I've mentioned this to our new chief, Rico Boyce, and other veterans in RPD. I said, but our young people don't have to worry about getting killed by African American officers, one way or the other. All of our shootings come from white males, and not just one, oftentimes more than one. And so, what is with that? And they understand. Yes, Ms. Kim, we agree, but we have not said anything about it. I think that's the disloyalty to humanity where the rift between communication and trust come, because while every cop is not bad, the good cops are just quietly allowing the bad cops to be bad. And that is what breaks down our community, generation after generation. And that is where the culture is allowed to continue to exist and permeate throughout the city.
And like we've said, also, it's not just limited to the city limits either. It's
Sure.
all over the state and all over the country,
Yes.
especially in this region of the country. One story that has come up recently is of the two North Carolina Patrol, State Patrol officers who had around, I think it's up to nearly 200 cases dropped that they were involved in.
Yes.
Outrightly dropped.
Yes.
And that was due to a credibility issue, so they say. How do you think that sort of represents the culture as well as represents the lack of confrontation, criticism, and corrections within the law enforcement community from people like our black police chiefs and other black officers who work with these people, who work with these officers who have had notable credibility issues?
Well, I think it speaks volume to the culture, and that's why they cannot be trusted. And we're here talking about a district attorney Lauren Freeman, who dropped over 180 cases, yet she has not prosecuted anybody. Obviously, either she feels as if the person's 180 victims or cases, at some point they're okay or should be okay with being wrongly prosecuted or targeted or whatever that pattern of practice is. It again says that African Americans are disposable. They don't have the humane abilities to warrant fair treatment under the law, equal protection under the law, and whoever, in this case, are the two state troopers, their existence is more important at a level of life or quality of life than to punish them for the 180 cases that they've been found to be discredited in. And that is what we're saying, because today we talk about 180 cases, obviously, of those who were alive. Mr. Mason did not make it, and they still aren't arrested. So we're still talking about the comparison of whose life is worthy. And that means this is not even just a culture about policing. This is also a culture of white supremacy found in our district attorney's office. Because we'll just drop the cases and pretend like the people were not human. And that also means that who we're choosing, and we see this time and time again, how difficult it is to obtain footage, how difficult it is to obtain any kind of transparency, even though that may be the slogan on a lot of the police departments' websites. They talk their slogans support transparency and building community and relations, and they use all the good language. But what we see practice is the opposite. Um, and it takes us back to slavery, where patrollers felt as though blacks were property. Everything belonged to them, from their children to their bodies to the crops that they grew. Well, we're back because what we see is that now they believe the building is theirs. I have been stopped by RPD from walking into buildings to come in, and I will just mention her name is Rebecca Tisdale, and I know she wouldn't mind me saying, but she was actually in this area years ago, solicited for prostitution. And at the end of the day, um, she found out it was an undercover right in this area. And instead, he sexually withheld her. And she felt free enough after coming to a place in her life where she wanted to come, she wanted to tell her story. And when RPD found that I would be accompanying her to file her official grievance, they would not let her come with me. Mm. So we have been done this way. I think Kyron Hinton is another case right here on Raleigh Boulevard where the young man was attacked by all 3 law enforcement agencies. Call came in that he had a gun. They arrived right here on Raleigh Boulevard. He only had a cell phone. And he was attacked by the deputy's dog. When he noticed it was a phone, they just let his dog maul him. Mm-hmm. And they placed him at Wake Med for 4 days, 3 to 4 days, without allowing him to use the phone. So he was missing from his family for 4 days, 3 to 4 days, and they charged him with attacking the dog. Mm. Lauren Freeman had to drop the charges once she saw the video, and let the young man, actually she dropped the charges on him, but picked up charges on the law enforcement. The sad part is that some of the law enforcement did not want to release their tapes. So WRAL, WTVD, News and Observer, I believe, they came together to file in court for that video footage to be released to the public. What people didn't know is that there was a tape already available out by an innocent witness, bystander, and placed it on social media. RPD saw it, called her, and intimidated her to take it down. And so the day of the release from the courts, I received a call at 10 o'clock in the morning from who was the community liaison, a black male by the name of Michael Ballin, who texted and asked, Dr. Kim, can we meet? And I said, sure. He said, how soon can you meet? And I said, let me know. I've never received a call from him before. 10 a.m. He asked for he asked for Diana Powell to come with me, and I reached out to her, and then I, for safety, reached out to Don Blakegrove of North Carolina Emancipate. And once we did that, we got there, waited. He didn't show right away, but he let us know he was in a meeting and would be on his way. We would find out later that the chief of police, a black female, called an emergency meeting with clergy to let them know about the court order video that's going to be released. And basically, they blocked us from coming to that meeting because we were the only ones who knew about what had happened. We saw the video before it released. And there again, 2 blacks, chief of police, community liaison, who had us sit for 4 hours, black women. So even they teach our black people how to disregard our lives. And that's almost the requirement, is that you have to look at us as someone who you can kill and justify it. Subjects, absolutely. And I think for me, I've lived in this area all my life, and we understood what poverty was, and we even understood how far to go with some of the respect, even amongst poverty. But I've been more devastated at what training and what professionalism and all of these words are, DEI, and to see this is how this operates. This is a whole nother level of something that I have never encountered, and I'm almost scared to share with the bottom. This is what your end goal should be. Like, just stay poor, broken, and ignorant. Because if this is the top, I may not want you to really see this is what real where we're trying to go.
Yeah.
If that and this is the definition of what they say protect and serve is.
Just briefly, what role do you think um, the actual political scene plays into this? So, um, who we elect, what party they're from, and their positions of power, and whether they act on it or not, on these specific cases that we're talking about in terms of a culture of cover up with not just law enforcement but a community in general. Um, what role do you see the political process potentially playing in this, whether in the solution or in perpetuating the problem?
Well, I'd like to start by saying I would love to talk about the example of Mandela, Nelson Mandela, who served 29 to 30 years in a South African jail for attempting to liberate his people. And when he exited those walls, he immediately was elected as the president of South Africa. But his stay was not long. He wanted to make sure he established a foundation that he could pass the baton. So he only served one term. And he fought just as well as he did, in his earlier days from a political standpoint. Today, we see career politicians. And the problem is, a lot of it is personal ambition. And so we don't get the hard throb advocacy that we should, because the longevity is if you say nothing or remain complicit. So just for an example, even in District C, all of those murders that I mentioned, no one said anything about publicly that represented District C. No one said anything about Darrell Wims from District C. No one's senators, House of Representatives, city council members. They're all black, they're all in his district. No one said anything about it. Nobody said anything about how to change policy to protect. Because, again, ambition and climbing the ladder requires that you remain complicit and be quiet. So I often say our silence, our own silence, is our violence. And that's what we're seeing amongst many of our politicians. Now, if you want to be a strong win and fight and put yourself back in because you fought, that's one thing. But if you're in because you were quiet, that's another.
Do you think it's more so the individual person who's either running or already in office that feels pressured to be complicit, or is it more that you think they truly want to improve the situations, but they cannot, they're constrained physically or rhetorically from others they have to answer to?
I think it's a little bit of both. I've been to the city council meetings to bring families before the city council, and they pretty much just look and they'll blame it on, oh, it's under investigation or what have you. But even after the investigation, we still don't get an apology or a letter of support or sorry from the city. But when George Floyd died, the mayor, city council, they were all crying, they were with the family. So you do this for an outsider who made national news, but you won't say a word, like you won't dry, no tears.
For your own community members.
For your own community members. And that is the problem that I have. And if that is what it takes to be a politician, to serve your people, then I don't know what your definition of serving your people are.
Yeah. We've discussed a few different ways that we could try to improve this culture. And some of it may whether it be a inspiring, charismatic leader that comes out of the woodwork, or it's just an entire community and mass change of mentality. about accountability.
Sure.
Um, what are some ways that you see us moving forward, even though I believe you think it's probably going to be a long and difficult process? Um, what do you see um, way? What do you see changing that could actually improve the situation? And what are some things that you're personally working on for that endeavor?
How? Well, I think sometimes it only takes a moment to push a movement, and where we are is conditioning. And I believe overall our people are in need of a strong break
Mm.
um, of reality. Um, Case in point, the word violence is usually associated with us. Stop the violence, and how can we stop the violence? But we don't talk about the violence of a city who's stolen
Mm.
much systematically. And I think because systematically everything has happened so methodically, it's happened professionally by those who are in upper, it becomes a thing where you don't look at the city's corruption as violent. And so they're able to tell you, we're working on it. The system is broken. They don't use violence as that word. They use, we're getting more training. So they civilize their violence.
Mm-hmm.
But when we shoot each other, is, oh my God, it's violence. Look at the stats. It's roll. We're all, and so we don't stop it and say, no, our violence comes from your violence, from the poverty that you engineered.
Yeah.
And those are some of the things that I'm working on now through a forum called Miss Callie's Adventures. Well, I go back into slavery and I bring us current to show our young people and our adults how we got here. And I incorporate politicians today and those who are responsible for representing us. So you should see that. We are also working with the United States Department of Justice, who we are challenging to look at it from a different lens, from just saying that typically the US DOJ has come into a city once there's a murder, and then they conduct an investigation on the police department. Breonna Taylor, Freddie Gray in Baltimore, of course, there George Floyd in Minneapolis. But we want to challenge them not just to take a look at policing, because policing are given permission by the city, and the city is actually not ran by the city. The city is ran by developers. And when an area such as East College Park or areas like South Park are areas where development is supposed to happen, or urban renewal, what we'll find is that most of our murders are coming from those areas. So it's almost a clearing that happens so that they can justify taking over those areas. So we're collaborating our stories to show not just a police issue, but a systematic city issue, which has been complicit, and that is why they won't fix it, because they need a reason to remove or get rid of us.
That has a historical legacy as well too.
It's generational. It is, and so it's now is detectable. You can see it. We have maps from Wake County that shows the restrictive covenants that show that all of the areas that are not hit with police brutality are in areas that the covenant deeds say blacks can't live here. So concentrated black poverty is where all of our murders are taking place. And when you have black chiefs that look at this data and say nothing about it, then the illusion of, oh, we don't have crime anymore. You can no longer say that, because the lack of crime is not the definition of justice. And we have to stop that narrative.
Yeah. For people who may be listening or reading that want to get involved and help you, how can they do that? And what are some resources and organizations that you work with that you think other people that would be worthwhile for them to participate with?
Thanks for asking. I am the executive director for Raleigh PAC. That's Raleigh Police Accountability Community Task Force, where we're driving deep some of the root causes, of course, marijuana stops, traffic violations, those those are patterns of practice where we see the most engagement between blacks and police officers. Stopping the culture and holding black officers accountable so that they can be responsible for black deaths outside. We are pushing for that initiative. We're also pushing for um, making it more feasible to have community on the inside to do grievances versus allowing the police themselves through their internal affairs process. Um, and we're with Save Our Sons agency, of whom I am the president, we're doing initiative Freeze. Freeze meaning since we are unprotected or we don't receive equal protection under the law under the 14th Amendment, we're asking for the state of North Carolina and the federal government to stop our taxes as a form of reparations. And Freeze is an initiative to say, since you won't pay us, at least stop our taxes from being involved into a system that doesn't protect us. Because no taxation without representation is what we want to push.
Yep.
We're not protected here, and none of our representatives say anything when we die, so we're not represented.
Well, I appreciate you coming by and speaking with me, and hopefully we can put this story out and make some progress of our own for this particular endeavor of the culture of cover-ups.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for your time.
much.
Appreciate you.